Why people love museums. Level C, 1 Advance. Museums are often seen as quiet, solemn places, buildings filled with paintings, ancient artifacts, and glass cases that seem to whisper, "Do not touch." Yet, despite their stillness, museums continue to attract millions of people every year. From the grand halls of the Louvre in Paris to the small, local history museums in small towns, they are spaces where time, memory, and imagination come together. But what exactly makes people love museums so much? Why do we voluntarily walk through echoing rooms, studying old objects or abstract art pieces, as if they hold a secret about who we are? The answer lies deep in human nature. People love stories. We are storytellers and story seekers by instinct. Every exhibit, every ancient vase or modern sculpture is a story frozen in time. It tells us something about the people who made it, the society they lived in, and how they saw the world. Museums give us access to these stories, not through words alone, but through objects that once had real lives. When you look at an ancient sword or a handwritten letter from centuries ago, you feel a strange connection to people who lived long before you. That moment of connection across time and culture is one of the most powerful experiences a museum can offer. But the love for museums goes beyond curiosity or nostalgia. In a world full of noise, speed, and endless digital distractions, museums provide something rare: silence and focus. Inside a museum, time slows down. You walk, you look, you think. You don't scroll, you don't swipe, you don't hurry. This slower rhythm creates a space for reflection, and reflection is something people secretly crave. Many visitors don't go to museums just to see things. They go to feel something calm, inspired, thoughtful, or even small in front of history's vastness. There is also an element of awe. Psychologists call this emotion awe experience, a mix of wonder, admiration, and even humility. You might feel it standing in front of a giant dinosaur skeleton, or looking up at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. That feeling reminds us that the world is larger, older, and more mysterious than our daily routines suggest. Museums are one of the few public places designed specifically to evoke awe. And in doing so, they give us something that modern life often lacks: a sense of transcendence. Another reason people love museums is their promise of authenticity. In an era dominated by screens and simulations, museums contain the real thing. The brushstroke on a Van Gogh painting is not a reproduction, it's the very trace of the artist's hand. The ancient coin you see behind glass was actually used by someone 2,000 years ago. This physical authenticity has emotional power. It gives the visitor a sense of contact with reality, not the digital or reconstructed version, but the original. For many, that authenticity feels almost sacred. Museums also serve as places of learning, but learning that feels voluntary and personal. Unlike school, where learning is structured and often stressful, museums allow people to explore knowledge at their own pace. You can spend 20 minutes studying one object, or simply walk through the entire gallery in silence. You choose what to focus on. That freedom transforms learning into a pleasure. People leave museums not only more informed, but also more curious. The best museums ignite a spark, a desire to read more, to understand more, to look again. Moreover, museums help us build collective identity. When you visit a national history museum, you're not just learning about the past, you're seeing how your country chooses to tell its story. The exhibits, the narratives, and even what is not displayed all reflect cultural choices. Museums, therefore, are not neutral. They shape memory, identity, and even politics. But that's part of their power. Through museums, societies decide which values to preserve and pass on. People love museums, consciously or not, because they help us answer a deep question: who are we? At the same time, museums are evolving. The image of dusty halls filled with ancient statues is slowly disappearing. Modern museums have become interactive, digital, and engaging. Many use virtual reality, touchscreens, and immersive installations to create experiences that blend education with entertainment. This shift reflects the changing expectations of visitors, especially younger ones who want to participate rather than just observe. For some, this interactivity makes museums more exciting. For others, it threatens their traditional atmosphere of quiet contemplation. But either way, it keeps museums alive and relevant. There's also something deeply democratic about museums. They are open to everyone, rich or poor, young or old, local or foreign. You don't need to be an expert to enjoy art or history. You just need curiosity. In that sense, museums act as great equalizers. They give everyone access to the world's cultural heritage, often for free or for a small fee. That accessibility makes museums not only cultural institutions but also social ones. They bring people together: tourists, students, families, researchers, and remind us that knowledge and beauty belong to all of humanity, not just to a few. Finally, museums are places of memory, both collective and personal. A child visiting a museum for the first time might remember it for life. A traveler might keep the image of a particular painting as a symbol of an entire journey. People often visit museums not just to see the exhibits, but to create memories with loved ones. A museum visit can become a ritual, something families, couples, or friends share across generations. In this sense, museums are emotional spaces as much as intellectual ones. The modern museum is no longer just a building. It is an ecosystem of experiences, both physical and digital. In the last 2 decades, technology has completely transformed the way we interact with culture. Virtual museum tours, high-resolution 3D scans of artifacts, and online exhibitions have made it possible to explore collections without ever leaving home. For some people, this digital access is revolutionary, a chance to see treasures they could never afford to visit in person. Yet for others, it raises a question. If you can see everything online, why go to the museum at all? The answer, once again, lies in emotion and atmosphere. Seeing an artwork on a screen and standing in front of it are entirely different experiences. The digital image can inform you, but it cannot move you in the same way. When you stand before a painting, you sense its size, texture, light, and presence. The museum space shapes the encounter. You notice how the artwork interacts with others around it, how the light falls on it, how people react to it. These subtle sensory details create what we might call the aura of authenticity, something that even the best digital technology cannot reproduce. Still, digital tools have expanded the definition of what a museum can be. They allow curators to tell stories in new ways through sound, motion, and interactivity. Some museums now invite visitors to use augmented reality glasses that overlay digital information on real objects. Others use artificial intelligence to personalize the visit. Based on what you look at or linger on, the system recommends other exhibits you might enjoy. These innovations are not replacing the traditional museum experience. They are enriching it, turning it into a dialogue between past and present, human and machine, physical and virtual. Another reason people love museums today is their growing social and ethical role. In the 21st century, museums are not only about preserving the past, they are also about shaping the future. Many institutions have begun to address difficult questions: colonial history, cultural ownership, gender inequality, and representation. Exhibitions now often highlight marginalized voices or reinterpret old collections from new perspectives. This change has made museums more inclusive, but also more self-aware. They no longer pretend to be neutral spaces. They acknowledge that every collection has a story, and every story has a bias. Visitors appreciate this honesty. Modern audiences value transparency and authenticity, even in institutions. When museums show not only their treasures but also their debates, they become more human. People don't want to see perfection. They want to see truth. And truth is often complex. This emotional openness allows museums to connect with a new generation of visitors who are skeptical of authority but passionate about meaning. The emotional impact of museums is also deeply tied to the concept of empathy. When we look at an ancient sculpture of a mother holding her child, or a painting of someone suffering, we don't just analyze it, we feel it. That emotional connection across time and culture builds empathy, reminding us that human emotions, love, fear, hope, grief, have always been the same. Museums cultivate empathy by allowing us to step into other people's worlds. This ability to imagine lives different from our own may be one of the most valuable outcomes of a museum visit, especially in a world increasingly divided by ideology and technology. Furthermore, museums are becoming spaces for participation and creativity, not just observation. Many modern institutions encourage visitors to contribute to share their own stories, memories, or interpretations. Some museums host community projects, open workshops, or collaborative art installations. This shift transforms visitors from passive spectators into active participants in culture. It also reinforces the idea that history and art are living processes, constantly reinterpreted by new generations. There's also an environmental dimension to museums' evolution. As global awareness of climate change grows, many museums are rethinking their operations to become more sustainable. They redesign buildings for energy efficiency, use recyclable materials for exhibitions, and even address environmental themes in their programs. Some museums focus entirely on nature, ecology, and conservation, blending science and art to inspire action. Visitors increasingly see museums not just as places that preserve the past, but also as institutions that help protect the planet's future. Interestingly, the love for museums is not limited to traditional institutions. Street art galleries, pop-up exhibitions, and immersive installations like Van Gogh Alive or TeamLab Borderless in Tokyo are redefining what a museum experience can be. These spaces turn art into a full-body experience with moving lights, music, and interaction. Critics sometimes argue that such shows are more about entertainment than education. Yet their popularity proves something important. People crave contact with beauty and meaning, no matter the format. Whether in marble halls or digital projections, the desire to experience art remains universal. Museums also play a therapeutic role. Art therapy and cultural wellness programs are now common in many museums. Hospitals, schools, and community centers collaborate with museums to support mental health, memory care, and social inclusion. Simply spending time in a museum, observing art in silence, can reduce stress and anxiety. Some researchers call this the museum effect, the calming psychological impact of being surrounded by meaningful objects in a quiet, ordered environment. For many people, a museum visit feels like meditation, a form of cultural mindfulness. Ultimately, people love museums because they offer something irreplaceable: continuity. In a rapidly changing world, museums remind us that humanity has been through revolutions, crises, and rebirths before. They show us that creativity never stops, even in dark times. Each exhibit, each artwork, is proof that human beings always tried to understand their world and to leave a mark on it. When we walk through a museum, we are not just looking at objects. We are walking through the history of thought, emotion, and imagination itself. Museums are not just about what they contain, they are about what they awaken: curiosity, wonder, reflection, a sense of belonging to something greater than oneself. That is why people will always love museums, even as the world becomes more digital and fast-paced. Because deep down, museums answer a fundamental human need: the need to remember, to understand, and to feel connected across time. In the end, museums are not only about the past, they are about the present moment, the way we choose to engage with our own culture, our shared humanity, and our collective future. They teach us that beauty and knowledge are never static. They live and grow with every visitor, every new idea, and every act of curiosity. So when someone stands quietly in front of a painting or an ancient sculpture, lost in thought, they are not escaping reality, they are returning to it. That stillness, that connection, that spark of recognition across centuries, that is why people love museums.